Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and the all-around tech guru. What's up, Greg?
Oh, not much, man. How are you?
I'm well, dude. I'm well. Excited about today's episode, and I'm feeling good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited. Like, this is always, our guest can. Oh, they know who our guest is. Why are we trying to hide it? Rob's always great. Like,
Yeah, man. He was last episode 27, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that one did really well. He shed some light on some really interesting things, like his time working in the film industry, how he reviews Rob's car movie review each month, and just his whole process. And this episode, we're going to dive into his latest article, which is Rob's movie muscle, but it's a little bit different. So I hesitate there, and Rob will get into it, and we'll talk all about it. But yeah, it's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you totally glossed over my favorite part of 27, which was Nash Bridges. But that's because I'm a Nash Bridges fan. I'm a little weird.
Well, Don Johnson's super cool, and so is Cheech Marin. So I love that show too. Although it was a little bit before my time. I bet it was like on basic cable for you, right?
Yeah, I was on USA Network. I'm ashamed to admit it, but yeah, I remember watching it on my 19-inch color, like CRT, like Emerson TV.
Yeah,
and it actually had the box on top was a slider.
Yeah,
like there was no remote control changing the channel, because if you changed it off of channel 3, you didn't get any signal.
Did the show come on right after or before Walker Texas Ranger?
No, Walker Texas Ranger at the time, I believe, was still on CBS.
No, it was on USA.
Oh yeah, it was, but that was way down the road. I think like when I was watching Nash Bridges, I'm pretty sure Walker was still on CBS, like prime time or whenever, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever he was on.
You're not that much older than me.
No, but Walker Texas Ranger didn't go syndicated until I think after Nash Bridges, right? I don't know.
I don't know. We're getting off on the whole thing. Let's roll into the episode. Let's bring Rob on.
All right, man.
Rob Finkelman, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on, brother?
I'm back again, and I'm very thankful for it. I had a really good time the last time we chatted. So
yeah, man, that was a fantastic episode.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Got to reminisce about the good old days at Nash Bridges and so forth. We talked about all of that, but
that was cool, man. If you haven't, for our audience, if you haven't seen that episode, go back and check it out right now, because it was a fantastic episode. Like Rob said, he regales us with a bunch of different stories from his time in television and film, and we talk cars. So it's not just about films, but it was a lot of fun. And like he said, he dropped some serious bombs about Nash Bridges and some other really. Yeah.
I think we should even give a spoiler alert that if you love Nash Bridges and you love Hemi Cudas, maybe you shouldn't watch the episode, because the bombs that I drop might really shatter your memories and dreams.
Yeah, people get real weird about their love of cars, man, and they don't like that. But I'm not going to say that. I think you should go back and watch it, and hopefully that was provocative enough that you do.
Yeah.
But but seriously, Rob, thank you so much for making some time to come back on.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. So this time around, though, we have a couple other subjects we got to get into.
That's right. We've run a few of your articles since the last time you were on, notably Rare Rides, who the audience just seems to love, man. What is your secret, and why do you think the audience seems to be so responsive to that column in particular? Not that your others aren't, but the numbers don't lie, man. And that thing is a fan favorite.
I think it's a combination of things. Number one, it happens to be my personal favorite column, largely because, like you and everybody else, I'm sure, watching. If you're not watching this, then you're not a car maniac. Let's put it that way. And I'm a car maniac. I'm a freak. And I am a freak for modern muscle, but also vintage. And learning, to write those articles, I basically have to take a bachelor's degree worth of self-education on some of these cars, because some of them are so rare, I've never even heard of them. And I just love that. I love learning about a car I knew nothing about or knew very little about, usually at the very most. And so there's sort of a passion for me in writing that column and researching it, that I think the enthusiasm sort of translates. It's clear that I'm really into what I'm telling people and sharing with them. There's that. And the flip side of the coin is I get a lot of comments, emails from people who feel exactly the way I do. Wow, I've been a Corvette guy my whole life, and I didn't know that they put an aluminum 427 in a Corvette, and only sold 3 of them in 1969. You can be a fan of whatever mark is your thing, be it Mopar, be it Ford, whatever. There are very, very rare niche models out there. So many, in fact, that we've been running that column for a couple of years now, at least.
And not run out of material.
And I've got plenty more. That's the good news. Every time I start running low on my little list on my computer that I keep, I'll just go on the internet and do some searches, and I discover there's a whole host of cars where they made under. I don't think we've done a car, now that I think about it, that they've made more than like 1,000 cars. Some of them, like I said, there's been 3 made or 10 made. In the case of the Hemi Cuda, the 7071 Hemi Cuda convertibles that I covered a couple of months ago, there was like 9 made the first year and like 11 made the second year, and that's that. And
yeah, man. When you did the Hemi Cuda article, you already had some previous knowledge there, because number one, you're a huge fan, you're a Mopar guy, and then obviously like the work that you did with Nash Bridges, and so you had this, like, you'd done research on that car before because you loved it. What, out of all those columns that you've done for Rare Rides, which is the one that sticks out in your mind when you think about it as, man, when you assigned it to yourself or when we talked about it or whatever, you're like, I don't know anything about this freaking car?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that probably the most fun for me personally was the Hemi Cuda convertible. That's kind of my end-all be-all dream car. If I had a spare $4 million laying around, I'd probably pick one of those up. But to your point, like the ones that were the most fun in terms of I never knew that existed type of stuff, or I know nothing about it. The 70 Coronet 426 convertible. I never knew that they made those, and I believe there were 3. And one of them was this glorious, it was like a metallic butterscotch color. I forget the paint code, but it has since turned into a famous car because it was featured on Graveyard Cars with Mark Warman. And that was a really cool article. What was the last one I just did? That was
Rare Rides was the Copo.
Oh yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a Copo Camaro? And although most people have heard of Copos before, as opposed to some of the cars I cover that you might not have ever heard of, who doesn't love a 2,000-word article on like just getting into the nuts and bolts of a Copo? That was a lot of fun. Getting into the history of how they used the what was really a program to produce fleet cars like taxis and police cars to make, like, you know, this hyper muscle car. It's amazing, you know. It's an
Yeah,
amazing story.
if you're like a, you know, a car person, or just like a, you know, brand myopic like you're talking about, and you're crazy about that one car, it's cool because you start reading those articles and you envision what was going on at the time. Like when you're writing about, you know, someone like Vince Piggins, or, you know, these people who were involved in the central office production order program, right? You know, I can envision that time in my head, and I wasn't alive back then. I wasn't around, but I know the cars. I know, you know, there's, you know, stock boy behind the counter, and, you know, I know how all of that's playing out. And so I'm reading your articles and I'm taken back there, and I think it's really cool. And I don't know if that's what other people get from it, but it's a part that I really enjoy.
Well, I've long told friends and family that I was born about 15 years too late, because I was actually born in '69. I'm going to be 51 years old on Friday. And
Happy birthday.
I should be like 66 right now, because then I could have been a kid during the golden era of muscle cars. And as my favorite music pretty much still dates from that era as well. I was a big fan of Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Stones and whatnot. And
well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, and I agree with you. I tend to agree with you. But then you would never have heard of, you know, Audio Slave, or,
that's true too.
You know,
That's
Chris Cornell.
And we're going to get into that. You and I, you know, our generation.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but yes.
No, that's fine. I'm a little older than you, but our generation definitely had its own musical renaissance in the early 90s. That's, to me, probably the last great era of rock music. These days, music has gone down different routes that I don't quite understand, and I hate feeling
much like Hollywood cinema.
Like, what are these kids listening to these days? You know, but that's kind of how I feel.
Do you have a porch, Rob? Do you sit out there and
get off my lawn, you bastard? Yeah, but that's we'll get into that for sure, because this month's movie muscle ties into music.
Exactly, man. So as popular as Rare Rides is, and I do have another question for you before we move from that topic. I've always been curious, you know, by now you've been doing Rare Rides long enough that I'm sure you have a formula that works as far as, you know, maybe like layout for the article. But do you start in the same place when you start conducting your research? Do you always, you know, start from, you know, the ground up, or how does that work?
You know, it usually depends on how much I personally know about the car going into it. For the Hemi-Cuda article, believe it or not, until I got into the middle of the article where I started talking, you know, it's a prerequisite that I mention either paint codes or package, you know, like options packages and stuff, which I don't have like a photographic memory of. Before that, I wrote that whole article from memory. Like, I knew, you know, the designers, I knew the impetus to build it based on, you know, I had that down pat. So like in that article, you know, I wrote the first half of it just off the top of my head. And then, like I said, when I had to get into the mechanical minutia, there's stuff I know clearly. I know, for example, you know, all the engines available and the trannies available and stuff. But then when you get into the details about elastomeric bumpers and what colors you could have the shaker hood with, you know, you start to have to do some research. Then conversely, there's cars where, like I said, I knew nothing about them. And there was a Ford Galaxy with a 427 in it that I did a couple of years ago. Didn't know anything about it. And so the method I usually do, you know, I'll do some Google searches. I'll find there's just tons of fan-based and owner-based websites out there. And they're all probably pretty well intentioned. The problem is there is sometimes erroneous information. So you really have to sometimes even just weigh the consensus. Like, okay, here's 5 websites about, you know, a Ford Galaxy 427. 3 of them say you couldn't get it with Ford, you know, like an automatic, and then 2 say you could have it with an automatic, but no one opted for it. What's the, you know, what's the true story behind that? And it's,
well, if you don't report it right, you'll definitely hear it in the comments.
There's
Not
been,
that you don't. You're very thorough.
I am very thorough, but I will also admit there have been 1 or 2 incidents where something just slipped in that just wasn't quite, you know, on the nose, and our readers were quick to.
to your credit though, Rob. I mean, so like you said, you wrote that whole Hemi Cuda convertible article like from memory, and then you essentially went back and like fact checked yourself and filled in the blanks.
Yeah.
But for some people, you know, I mean, their car isn't that Hemi Cuda convertible; it's that Ford Galaxy, and so they know all those things about that Galaxy, and so for them, it's like.
I'll freely admit, I mean, there are people out there that certainly know more about these cars than I do. I doubt anyone has more of a desire than I do to get the story right. I take great pride in that, and I'm quick to admit when I've, you know, there's an error or something's not quite right, and I'm quick to contact you and say, hey, I just learned, you know. And
well, that's the beauty of a digital magazine. We have the ability to go back and fix it. It's not hard in print.
Right.
But yeah, no. To your point, I think all of those reasons are why that one is such a fan favorite. People love learning and people love being entertained, and you do both of those in that column.
Yeah, well, that's what I aspire to, definitely. And like I said, it is my favorite of my columns. So yeah.
So be on the lookout for.
I was going to talk to you after the show. I think I want to do another Rare Rides for next month. So we'll talk cars. And
December, you guys be on the lookout for Rare Rides in December.
Yeah.
That depends. No, this episode will air before then. We're good. But yeah, so that's all of that. And you know, Rob's car movie review is no slouch either, and Rob's movie muscle performs equally as well. But you know, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have you back on the show, Rob, was because this month's edition of Rob's Movie Muscle is a bit of a departure. As you know, coming up with specific movie cars each month does have its challenges. And, you know, just like we were talking about off camera, Hollywood seems to be like infatuated with these superhero movies, and the new car related cinema is few and far between, save for the Fast franchise, which we can get into. But like I said, this month we took a bit of a departure from the norm. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about the angle you took and what your take is on it?
Yeah. You know, that's a long running column. And I think in our last podcast episode, or excuse me, RodCAST episode, we discussed the fact that it was actually you who came up with the idea for that column. Prior to that, I was doing Rare Rides and Rob's movie review. And I was also doing motoring news type articles and features about maybe particular shows I had seen, like car shows that I had gone to and so forth. And you suggested that you liked the movie reviews so much, but that given the dimensions of the article, the length of it, that I never really had the time to get deep into the cars. And you said, hey, why don't we do a companion column where instead of mentioning the cars but really focusing on the movie as what, you know, as a review of whether it's worth it or not to watch that film. You said, why don't we do one where we take cars from the movie and just focus solely on that car? And we've been doing that successfully for 2 years. And as you said, I get a lot of mail about those articles. People have always been interested in Hollywood, always been interested in the cars of Hollywood. And But having said that, well, that turned into Rob's Movie Muscle, your suggestion, and for 2 years now we've been doing it. It was a monthly column before the pandemic, and now I'm, because where we're at, I'm having to do it every few months. But for the whole time that we've been doing those, it occurred to me that there was maybe room to expand it into different areas, not permanently, but just every once in a while doing a column that.
Yeah, I think we did one that was a bit of, well, we did the Nash Bridges, the CUDA.
Yeah, and that was television, and so we had never done a TV show before, and that was a little different. But I really kept thinking, how can we, add some spice, so to speak, to it? And then just last month, you and I were talking on the phone, and you came up with the idea of, hey, there's a lot of music videos where there are some pretty sweet cars. And I was like, like my first thought was like ZZ Top with, the hot rod, but we don't really cover hot rods like that. So I said, well, what are you thinking about? And you sent me a list of a bunch of music videos that you were familiar with, and I picked two of them from it. And so this month's Rob's Movie Muscle, we're actually not dealing with a movie car at all. We're dealing
well, I mean, they are movie cars.
They are, but they come from music videos as opposed to. Oh, well, I see what you're getting at. Okay, yeah.
Because of the two that you selected, they are movie, and this is unique. Perhaps we'll revisit this and do the rest of that list. The time that's up to you, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's explain what you meant by that. So I picked two music videos, and coincidentally, because I didn't even realize this until you just said it, to be honest with you, both music videos happen to pay homage to some classic car movies. And it's funny, I must have done that subconsciously. Out of the whole list of music videos, I picked the two that relate to Hollywood films, and those videos are Sheryl Crow's Steve McQueen, which is a song that is an homage to the King of Cool, everybody's favorite badass, amateur, pro-am, I should say, race car driver, movie icon, car lover, Steve McQueen. And the second video is Chris Cornell's band Audioslave, post Soundgarden, and in which the video is a tribute to arguably my favorite car movie of all time, being a Mopar guy, the original Vanishing Point. And so this month I've reviewed both of those music videos, and they're both fantastic in their own way. They're different. They approach things differently, and we can get into that.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I want to do, Rob. And this is coming from a total layman, but I think music videos are really interesting pieces, right? So just a moment ago, you were talking about how you were born too late, right? And that seems to be a sentiment with younger car guys, because while we have this gnarly muscle available to us in the late model, exactly, the really beautiful architecture, came from back in the day. That said, I grew up in the early 2000s, like that was my adolescence, right? Yeah. And so I used to go home from school and, hop off the school bus and run inside, and my sister would already be there at the TV watching Total Request Live on MTV, right? Yeah. And so, and before us came things like Headbangers Ball and, stuff like that. And so music videos were a big part of my life. I loved music videos, especially for like cool rock bands. And so this kind of resonated with me a little bit. And in my opinion, music videos are almost kind of like mini movies. Is that a fair assessment, Rob? Would you say in some cases?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them can be, and I'm going to date myself, right? Well, I already have, because I told you all when I was born and so forth. But, you know, I grew up, I'm a little older than Vinny, and I grew up, my adolescence was the beginning of music videos. Like when I was, I think about 11 years old is when MTV started. And, you know, the early music videos were often pretty rough. If you see them today on YouTube, you know, they're shot with like really poor videotape and low production values and stuff. And they're kind of schlocky and whatnot. But very quickly, as MTV caught on and became this massive cultural thing for people my age, especially, to incorporate video with music. Directors started understanding that this was actually could be an artistic medium, and it didn't have to be just a shot of a band, you know, strumming guitars. You could tell stories. And in essence, a lot of music videos from that era, you know, Michael Jackson's Thriller is a perfect example. I mean, that video blew people's brains out. It was, the original Thriller video was like 20 minutes long. Even though the song itself is only like 3.5 minutes, they told the whole story. And the director was John Landis, of all people, who directed Animal House, An American Werewolf in London, Twilight Zone, you name it.
No wonder. Wait, you're talking about Thriller, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no wonder it looks like the makeup and everything. It looks like American Werewolf in London. That's cool.
Because the same people, you know, he was using the same people on his feature films as he was on that video. And so it really became an art form unto itself. Between Michael Jackson, Duran Duran made these incredible, for the day, incredible videos where they travel to places like Sri Lanka and Kenya and places like that, and really, you know, put money into it too. Let's not forget that by the 90s, big bands, you could expect a YouTube video to have like a $2 million budget. Now, you know, 30 years ago, you could get a feature film made, a low budget feature film made for a couple of $1 million before, you know, and shoot it on film and everything. You know, nowadays with high def video cameras, you can do things a lot cheaper. But in my era, you know, $2 million on a music video was just like, you know, what can't you do with $2 million? So I think videos really came of age in my childhood, and then expanded into your adolescence in the 90s, 2000s, and really became an art form. So
I know that you're not like, you're not, I don't want to classify you, but you're not snobby, as you mentioned before. You know, I mean, we talk about films and stuff, and you're not above watching a real stinker and reviewing it for the cause. But when you're, you know, studying, by the time you get to NYU and you're studying film, right? Do they kind of look down on music videos, or is directing? Do they teach something specific about them? Do you learn anything about that when you're in school?
You know, times have changed in regards to that. When I hit NYU, I started in, my first year was 88, and I graduated from the bachelor's film program in 1992. And in those days, you know, and I actually mentioned this on our last RodCAST in regards to Nash Bridges. When I was going to NYU, feature filmmaking, movie making was like where it was at. That was, you know, movie film directors were like the apex predator, okay, the great white shark of directing. And then if you couldn't cut it in feature films, you could become a television director. And then maybe below that was commercials and music videos. And then, as I said, as budgets soared and and the medium itself of music videos changed. That pecking order sort of became meaningless. And what you would see a lot of the time was two things. Number one, great film directors got their start shooting music videos. I'll give you a perfect example. David Fincher, director of Seven, director of Fight Club, Benjamin Button,
Wow.
and so forth, Zodiac, he's, to me, one of the top filmmakers of his generation. He started at Propaganda Films, which was a music video and commercial outlet. It was two companies called Satellite and Propaganda that merged, and he was one of their top commercial and music video directors, and then segued into feature films and became this iconic, director of iconic pictures. And then conversely, a lot of the time, feature filmmakers found that they enjoyed directing music videos, that they, like Martin Scorsese has directed music videos. He directed
anything with the Stones?
Because
I know he had that documentary about the Stones.
He did a feature film of a concert by the Stones, but I'm talking even before that, like in the era that I was in school, as a matter of fact. I remember Michael Jackson's Bad came out. I think it was Bad, or was it?
Scorsese shot that?
Yeah, in this, whichever one's in the subway in Manhattan. That's Martin Scorsese's music video. I think it was Bad. You forgive me, I'm not a mega Michael Jackson fan, so
that's
it was
wild.
Bad, or I think it was Bad, but someone out there can correct me and call me an idiot. That's fine. I'll take it. But yeah, I mean, Scorsese had already done. He was one of the top directors in Hollywood. Taxi Driver, After Hours, King of Comedy, Goodfellas. He had already done all of those films. I mean, he was top tier, A-list director. And then, sometimes these guys, they're not snobs either. I'm not a movie snob just because I went to school. I have some of my favorite films. You can call them guilty pleasures if you want. They might not be high art, but I find something in them that's either enjoyable or really interesting, the way the director handled a subject, or even just a scene. There could be a great scene in a movie, a bad movie, that makes it worth watching for me. And,
do you think that's those highbrow kind of people criticize it and say that it's almost like fast food? And then also, do you think that that's just too close-minded, because you do draw inspiration, the creative person can draw inspiration from something that's not, let's say, subpar?
That's a good question. I think, I guess I would answer that quality is quality in anything. If you're an aficionado of, let's say, wristwatches, a Vacheron Constantine or a Rolex or whatever might be up here, but you also might collect certain Seikos, or Timex or something. There you go. It's not an issue of snobbiness. It's an issue of quality. And that's what I meant when I said that there can be a scene in a horrible movie that just makes it worth it to me to watch that horrible movie. Well, in the past, we've talked about the original Gone in 60 Seconds, which is a terrible film. It really makes no sense. But that film had the longest car chase sequence in history in it. It was like the whole last act of the film was a car chase, and they crashed 150 cars or something to make that movie. And even though 3/4 of that film, you're just like, oh my God, like what, this is horrible. H.B. Halicki made that film for peanuts and had the moxie to go ahead and make his own feature film outside of Hollywood in 1974, spent his own money on it, and filmed arguably one of the great chase sequences. You know, it might not be Bullet or The French Connection, but it definitely ranks as one of the great car chases in movie history. And I just don't agree with being snobby about that. You know, yeah, it's a terrible film. Maybe Halicki, if he was still alive and he was on the RodCAST with us, would tell you, yeah, it's a piece of shit. But I'm really proud of that car chase, and he should be.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
I don't look at any of this in those terms. You know, if a music video has beautiful images in it, which many of them do, and have high production value, or just a great lip sync performance from the artist, you know, to the song that really, you know, brings out emotion in you and stuff. That's like anything else in life. You seek out, you know, the best you can, you know, you can have, the best wristwatch, the best car you can afford. And to me, it's along those lines. There's no, you know, there's no ego in it or pride in it anymore that, oh, I'm a movie director and it's beneath me to consider music videos art.
well,
That's just not true.
I'm curious about like some of the specifics, right? Like, so, what unique challenges does a director face when they're creating a music video as opposed to a feature-length film?
I would say it's a double-edged sword, and here's how. In a feature film, you have usually 2 hours to work with to tell a story. All Hollywood and most narrative films follow what's called a 3-act structure, which in layman's terms means a beginning, middle, and end. In screenwriting, however, it's a little bit more complicated than that. When you construct a story, there are plot points that have to happen at certain times. There's markers, there's character archetypes, there's all sorts of things that are people don't consciously recognize unless they're educated in filmmaking, really, but are present in every movie they've ever seen. And I took a class at NYU Film in which we studied, there was a book by a man named Christopher Vogler, and it was called The Writer's Journey. And in it, he examined the work of a man named Joseph Campbell, who was one of the most foremost experts and writers on Greek mythology and storytelling. And what Vogler did was he took Joseph Campbell's work with like archetypes, character archetypes that dealt with like psychology, like Carl Jung, like real actual human archetypes, and identified what those were in storytelling and how they were essential to storytelling. You always have a hero, you always have a villain. The hero always either has a sidekick or a mentor. That sidekick or mentor usually dies at a certain point in the story. And as I'm saying this, maybe some of you right away, a light goes off on your head because Star Wars follows that axiom identically. You have Luke Skywalker, who's your hero. You have Darth Vader, who's your villain. You have Han Solo, who's your sidekick or helper. And you have Ben Kenobi, Obi-Wan, who's your mentor. And Obi-Wan gets killed. And the moment Obi-Wan gets killed is the second act plot point in that film that spits us into the resolution of the movie. Obi-Wan gets killed relates to Luke destroying the Death Star to avenge Obi-Wan's death. And
pretty cool.
Save the rebellion. I'm sorry,
So,
you were going to say?
No, that's really interesting. But the point that you're getting at is that, like you said, you have 2 to 3 hours to tell that story, and 2 to 3 minutes isn't very long. What specific techniques can a director employ to kind of masquerade that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting to, in that in storytelling you have 2 hours to establish all these characters and flag posts and scenes and stuff. And in a certain way, that can be difficult. Because in a movie, you're usually dealing with a lot of characters, unless it's just a piece that deals with a couple and there's really no other ancillary characters. Usually you have a cast of 100 people in a feature film, and they all have their purpose. And the complexity of making a feature film, the money that's on the line these days. The average feature film costs like $80-90 million now to make, average. And there are a lot of complexities involved, therefore, in not only telling a story, but telling a good story. That's the other thing. There's a lot of movies made every year, and few of them make money. Few of them resonate in people's hearts. So that's a very difficult proposition. Conversely, some music videos that attempt to tell a story, it's difficult for the very opposite reason, in that you only have 3 minutes or 4 minutes to work with, and you need to establish character, setting, and plot in that 3-minute time span, 4-minute time span. And so each has its own challenges. To relate it to my own experience, the most difficult movies I ever made in my life were the short films I made at NYU. The longest one I made at NYU was 15 minutes long, and I had to create a character arc. I had to establish a character, let the audience know what his problem was, watch him try and resolve it, and then ultimately resolve it by the end of the film. And packing that into 15 minutes is tough. So it's difficult because you have to be succinct and direct and quick. In a feature film, to me at least, it's easier because you have more time to develop things and to include more characters. It doesn't have to be so simplified and direct. But then again, you're dealing with a whole broad spectrum of ideas that you now are expected to incorporate because it's a 2-hour format. Is that all too wordy, or does it make any sense at all? It's hard to.
I was tracking, but if you were to summarize it, I guess you would say.
I would say, yeah. If
Go
you
ahead.
want
I'm sorry.
the succinct version, and maybe cut out.
No, I'm with you. But if I'm understanding you correctly, I think it's that a feature-length film, you have a lot of space to fill to tell that story. With a music video, you don't have much space to tell that story, and so those are the challenges.
And each has its own set of challenges because of that. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the 2 videos that we mentioned in this month's article.
Yeah.
Let's start with Sheryl Crow's Steve McQueen. Can you give us a little bit of a summary of maybe not the song, but the video, and then your breakdown of what it was? Because by the time this episode airs, Rob, that article will be up. So everybody go check it out on streetmusclemag.com. But for those of you who are listening, you're going to get a little treat, and Rob's hopefully going to break it down for us right now.
Yeah. So Sheryl Crow in 2002 came out with an album called Come On, Come On. And on it, I believe it was the second single released from the album, was a song called Steve McQueen. And in part, it's an homage to Steve McQueen, the late iconic actor, car lover, race car driver, on and on. And also, it tells the story of a character depicted by Sheryl Crow herself in the video, who gets out of like small town America and escapes to Hollywood. And it's her, I believe the song is probably her comparing her own story to that of Steve McQueen. Both of them came from middle America. Steve McQueen actually had a pretty tough childhood. He was in a boys' home and went through some pretty tough times, and then made it to Hollywood and changed the course of his life. And Sheryl Crow did similarly. I believe she was from Missouri or Kansas, one of the Midwest states, and did the same thing. And I think she parallels her journey with Steve McQueen. And the video itself, though, is more of an homage to Steve McQueen. So we are given several scenes in the music video in which they have recreated the iconic moments, car moments, specifically from Steve McQueen's movie career. And and his life as well, I should say, because the very first clip in the music video that relates to cars is Sheryl Crow making that drive from the Midwest out to California, and she's doing it in a Porsche 356 Speedster, which was actually one of Steve McQueen's personal favorite cars that he owned. And then we get into a recreation of everybody's, ultimate car movie, Bullitt. And they have a perfect, and I mean perfect, replica of the car that just, as you know, just recently sold in the past year for a record. I think it was around $3.5–4 million at auction. One of the cars, the only surviving car from the movie Bullitt. They have just a dead replica for it, down to the correct wheels. They took the pony out of the grill, and they recreate scenes from Bullitt. They're not exact. It looks like to have been shot in Los Angeles as opposed to San Francisco. And there's a certain very famous race car driver who plays the bad guy. I won't reveal who that is. Y'all have to read the article to see. But he's driving a Yenko 427 Camaro replica instead of the iconic 68 Dodge Charger 440 Magnum that was in Bullitt. So there are differences, but the overall feel of it is a really well done homage to Bullitt. And then there's a sequence that tips the hat to The Great Escape, another wonderful Steve McQueen film where there are no cars, but there is an iconic motorcycle sequence, and they recreate that. And then to shore up the end of the video, they recreated a sequence to tip the hat to Le Mans, which was Steve McQueen's really his baby. Although he didn't direct the movie, he produced it, starred in it, and shaped pretty much every facet of that film himself. He wanted to his mission was to make the world's greatest racing car movie. And I believe he did. There's only one other film that I would even put in the same league as Le Mans, and that's a film by John Frankenheimer called Grand Prix, which followed the 1964 or 66 Formula One Grand Prix season across Europe and America. But Le Mans, if you guys haven't seen it, it's a must-see if you're a car guy, a racing fan. And so they show Sheryl Crow, running around Willow Springs instead of Le Mans in a original Ford GT40. And if you love cars, man, there's a lot to look at in that video for sure.
Listen, man, Sheryl Crow, you talk about 2002, she was as hot as it gets. Every woman, every person in America was listening to Sheryl Crow at that time. What was that song, Man, I Feel Like a Woman? I mean, she was huge. And so for her to be paying homage to Steve McQueen, that's pretty cool, man. Because now it's, it's like, if you're a car person, and we are, we take it for granted, right? Everybody knows Steve McQueen. Everybody knows Bullitt. Everybody knows his love affair with cars. But back then, maybe it wasn't on everyone's minds. And that might have been, no, that was much later than when he died. But I think it's cool of her to kind of, draw those parallels, like you mentioned. Yeah. What was your take on it as a whole, from a director's standpoint, from a filmmaker standpoint? What did you think of the video?
It's magnificent. It's a very talented director, Wayne Isham, I believe his name is, who I looked up his credits. He's done hundreds of music videos. They had a sizable budget, obviously, on this thing to recreate these sequences from McQueen's movies, and they did it right. You know, like I said, there are differences. They substituted cars for, you know, like in Le Mans, the Le Mans sequence. You know, in Le Mans, it was Le Mans prototype racers. So it was Porsche 917s, Ferrari 512Ps. They used GT40s, which did actually, obviously, we all know, win Le Mans. You know, so there was some artistic license, but what's great about it is the care with which the tips of the hat in the video don't require like photographic reproduction of the actual movie. It was more the essence of the movie, the spirit that they recreated. And there are little touches all over it that, like, for example, if you know Le Mans, one thing, the movie, one thing you're aware of is that Steve McQueen's racing suit in that film is very iconic. It was a white racing suit with the Gulf Oil logo with twin blue and orange stripes. And it's just, there are famous pictures of Steve McQueen wearing that racing suit, you know, from behind the scenes shots from the film as well as the movie itself. It's just burned into your memory if you know and love that film.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He was driving with a cast on his foot during the film of that.
Yeah, there were a lot of mishaps going on in that film. Some one of the stunt drivers actually lost his legs in an accident. There's actually a wonderful documentary I can recommend to you all out there. It's called Steve McQueen, The Man in Le Mans, and I believe it was either HBO or Showtime. It's a feature-length documentary with McQueen's son, Chad, and a host of other people that were involved in the making of the film. McQueen's ex-wife is featured in it heavily. And yeah, that was not the greatest or easiest film shoot in the world. It was very dangerous because they actually ran those cars at Le Mans speeds. And Steve McQueen did a ton of his own stunt driving, taking a Porsche 917 up to 230 miles an hour around the Le Mans circuit. So things, you know, happens, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's it's pretty incredible when you think about it, man. But your take as a whole,
I was going to say, give me one second to finish my thought, that you know, Sheryl Crow is seen wearing a racing suit in the music video that, again, is not an exact duplicate. It doesn't have the Gulf Oil logo or anything, but it has those stripes. And if you're a fan of the film, you got to appreciate that, man. You know, you see a music video where they took the time to choose little elements, you know what I'm saying? Just like little things that, little Easter eggs, if you will, that if you love.
Do you think that was by design from the director? Like, oh, I like that. I'm going to use that, but I'm not going to use all of it.
No, absolutely. I have no doubt about that. This is a man who knows his movies and knows his Steve McQueen. And even there's another great Easter egg. There's a moment in the bullet sequence where they perform a serious jump in that Highland Green Mustang replica over a hill in Los Angeles. And I mean, this car is probably 25 feet off the ground, and you see it land like a stunt driver landed that sucker. It's not like they just shot it out of a cannon or something and destroyed the car. It was an actual stunt that was performed. And when the Mustang's supposed to be driven by Sheryl Crow, it's not Sheryl Crow performing that jump, of course, but she goes on the outside and passes a light blue Volkswagen Beetle. before they perform the jump.
Yeah,
And
just like in the film.
Anybody who knows Bullitt knows that about that Volkswagen. So yeah, this was directed by a guy who took his time, knew his stuff, and really lovingly, paid homage to these films. So I loved it. Just loved it.
That's fantastic, man. Again, everybody go check it out on streetmusclemag.com. I want to move on to the next video in that column that you discussed, and that's Audio Slaves, Tell Me How to Live.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, but similar. Tell us about that one.
This video is a very carefully crafted, loving homage to, as I said before, one of my favorite car movies of all time. And that is Vanishing Point from 1971, which starred Barry Newman. But they took a different approach on this video to doing that homage. And the way they cleverly did it was, instead of recreating all these scenes, reshooting them essentially, they actually incorporated shots from the original film that I guess they were able to license. And then they made insert shots, is what they're really called, of the band to incorporate them seamlessly into Vanishing Point. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but what I'm really trying to say is the film, the video rather, has clips from the film, and instead of Barry Newman as Kowalski behind the wheel, you have Chris Cornell and Tom Morello and all the other guys in the Audio Slave. And the way they did this, the editing, and even right down to the color timing of the film, the way the film looks, the grain, they made it look exactly like a 1971 movie. And I know if y'all go and watch old movies, you'll notice movies back then look different than they do today. And there's a reason for that. The technologies in film processing and so forth were really not anywhere near what we have today with digital technologies and stuff that make things look high definition, sharp. Wasn't that case in 1971. So when you watch a film from that era, you see big golf balls of grain, and you see, all sorts of scratches on, because it was a film, it wasn't a digital movie. And they, in the scenes they shot of Audio Slave, they replicated all of that. And there are times where I couldn't tell. And I've seen Vanishing Point 800 times. I couldn't tell what was original and what was new.
Rob, how are they using filters? Is that something that happens post-production? I mean, this video was shot in what, late 90s? What technology were they employing to make something like that happen, where it's so seamless?
It's a good question. The original Vanishing Point movie, to achieve that dusty Western look, that iconic look that film has, they undoubtedly in those days used filters over the lenses, what's called a warming filter. You'll often see Westerns and films of that ilk, especially movies shot in the desert, where a director opts to put a warming filter over the lens to just give it this particular Old West sort of feel. And the original director of Vanishing Point chose that route. And to accomplish a match of the new footage to that, I would guess they did it digitally. I would guess that they didn't shoot it that way on set, because the tools you have now in filmmaking and post-production are just like limitless. And they probably were able to sample skin tones and colors of the background, like the desert, the sky, and then just plug those values into the video. But what's really amazing about it is not so much that they did it, it's the concept of doing it. That's what's amazing about this. You can do anything now with computers, with manipulating footage. but to come up with the idea to replace Kowalski with Audio Slave. And I mean, all the iconic scenes from the movie are there. And it's actual footage. I mean, it's Kowalski being in a street race with that Jaguar XKE. It's instead of the band that was playing on the stage at the Commune, which was called like Bonnie and Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, some hippie band. Now it's Audio Slave doing it.
I was so stoked that you chose that one for this article because, like you mentioned, you know, I had sent you a long list, and then that's the one that you came with, or one of the two. And I was stoked because I'm a huge Audio Slave fan. Chris Cornell and his career, rest his soul. It was you know, amazing. And so when I first saw this video, I was blown away because, like you, I love that movie. And so I was like, how did I not know about this? This is amazing. And I'm watching it, and only on the music video do you get this part. But just in the very beginning, they had that really cool like radio host, and he's talking about
Little, who played DJ Super Soul in the
Thank you, yes.
And it's very clever. They took a scene from Vanishing Point where he's in his radio studio and he's doing his act, you know, his DJ act. And coming up next, ladies and gentlemen, is the greatest band you ever. And instead of it being whatever band was on the soundtrack of the original film, they somehow had Cleavon Little saying, "This is Audio Slave," and it's perfect. I mean, and then boom, it launches into the song. And
not to mention that the song itself is like a really like cool and powerful song. So it's befitting of that, like the chase scenes and the racing and like just them driving through the desert. It totally works.
Yeah, God bless Chris Cornell, man, that he left us way too soon. We were talking before about our generation having, or my generation having its own last great era of rock music being grunge in the early 90s, mid 90s. And for sure, Soundgarden was perennially on my CD player at the time, with Nirvana and Alice in Chains too. And, Audio Slave was his post Soundgarden effort, because Soundgarden had broken up for a while in the late 90s. And he got together with the guys from Rage Against the Machine, who had coincidentally, that band had broken up, and they merged and came up with Audio Slave. And it's an amalgam of both bands, but it's its own separate thing. You know, Chris's voice sounds like he did in Soundgarden, and some of the riffs sound very Rage Against the Machine-y, but together there's something completely different, and it's a beautiful song. It's called Show Me How to Live, and it's a beautiful video. And as I say when y'all get to read the article, it's probably now one of my favorite music videos of all time. And like you, I wasn't aware of it. Somehow that escaped my radar. So,
yeah, man. You know what? That's one of those songs where I throw it on, I'll hop on my Camaro, hit the coast highway, and it's just, you're instantly in a good mood. You're rocking out. Yeah, man. It's good stuff.
You gotta love it.
But hey, I want to ask you some questions about filming that video specifically. Like, we haven't talked about this. Well, you mentioned it a little bit about when you talked about Nash Bridges and why he selected a convertible, but what challenges does a director face when using cars for films or music videos, and you're doing things at speed or not at speed? What's that like?
Well, filmmaking in general, and I include music videos in that, and commercials as well, the digital tools that we just got done talking about that are available these days make it a lot safer and a lot easier to really create whatever you want to on the screen. If you want a car to drive off the roof of a building and land on the roof of another building, well, in the old days, you had to do that for real. And that meant someone was risking their life. If y'all remember, I did a Rob's movie review of the film Hooper with Burt Reynolds. And at the end of that film, there's an amazing jump scene, which was the longest practical jump stunt ever performed in history. It was something like over 200-foot jump across a fallen bridge and a river. And some schmuck got into that Trans Am and actually performed that jump. And when you do stuff like that, man, there is always the likelihood that someone gets hurt or killed. And today, that's lessened because of the technologies that we have. The downside to that, I would argue, is when I used to go to films as a kid and I would see a tremendous stunt, I knew that someone actually risked their life doing it. And the marveling at that was because, wow, they really did this. That's incredible. And I can't quite these days get as excited about Fast and Furious when they drop a car out of an airplane and it lands wheels up and they just drive away. Because I know they didn't do any of that. Like, a guy sat behind his Mac and did that. And it doesn't have the same resonance with me. You know, I want to know that a stuntman nearly died doing that. I want to know it was done for real.
It doesn't look real.
No, and sometimes you're right. It just looks CGI, and you go, "Oh, that's fake," you know. And it takes you out of the movie. Let's put it that way. When you realize it's fake, that they faked it, you're thinking about, wow, they faked that, instead of like the first time you saw Bullet.
Imagine if you saw. Imagine if Dirty Mary Crazy Larry was CGI, dude. That ending with the train. Come on.
Yeah. So, there are inherent risks involved. I read, and I mentioned in the article, that in the Steve McQueen video, all of those jumps in the Bullet sequence are real. They had a stunt person, actually a stunt woman did the driving, so if you could barely make out the person behind the wheel, it was a woman that looked like Sheryl Crow. And they actually did that stuff. And that means you have to have a whole crew, a whole stunt unit. And we're not just talking a driver, we're talking coordinators, we're talking about paramedics that have to be on scene. We're talking sometimes as many as 20 or 30 people alone in a stunt unit to perform one jump. And having been there on set of big budget films, stunt-driven films, I can tell you it's very complicated. It's very, it's scary at times, and you're worried about the safety of the people involved at every moment.
I know that we, especially like off camera, and you and I have joked about this quite a bit, but we criticize like those Fast series films for being just not of quality. But does any part of you at least enjoy the fact that they aren't destroying these classic cars for the sake of film anymore?
Yes, because every article, movie muscle, or movie review I do, invariably I have to bemoan the fact that Hollywood destroys cars, and I hate it. I enjoy the fact, like I said, that if they perform a practical, actual stunt as opposed to CGI, I'm the first one to applaud them. But at the same time, when they take let's say Jack Reacher, for example, and they have that absolutely exquisite Chevelle, and they reduce that thing to rubble. Hey, I got news for you. That might not have been a genuine 454, Chevelle, but it sure looked like one, and it means that there is one less Chevelle in general.
Okay, I'm with you, Rob. But to your point from just a moment ago, that scene was fantastic. He's like being chased by that Audi, like S line or whatever it is.
Whatever it was, yeah.
It was fantastic. I loved that scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
you
great.
know, like
We did a movie Muscle on that together, I believe. That was one of the first ones we did.
that's
And
right.
yeah, so I'm with you, man. It's, you know, it's on the one hand, they do the stunts and you marvel at it, and then they destroy the car and you're like, oh man, you know, even like I said, even if it's not like a real SS, if it was a base
Yeah.
model that they just dress up, there's only so many of those cars left on the planet, man. And, you know, that's one less now. That goes to the scrap heap when they're done.
Well, or either that, or they're keeping the Hollywood film industry is keeping you know, body shops in business.
And they do. And they do. Clearly, they do. I know that.
But hey, moving back to Audio Slave,
Yeah.
can you kind of break it down for us a little bit, like the way that you did for the Sheryl Crow video? What went into it?
Yeah, I mean, it basically instead of picking scenes from different movies like they did in the Sheryl Crow video, the Audio Slave video is just one Vanishing Point tribute, and they basically followed the narrative of the film. So it begins with Cleavon Little and you know, introducing the band, and then we go right into the same narrative as the film. We see clips of police setting up a roadblock with those tractors, and we see Chris Cornell behind the wheel of the 70 Challenger RT 440 Magnum, you know, heading right for that roadblock and flooring it. And then just like the movie, it flashes back to like 5 days earlier, you know, and we learn in the movie, we learn how Kowalski gets behind the wheel of that car, what he's doing, what leads up to him trying to run this roadblock. The video, obviously, they don't have time to go into all of that minutia, but it still follows the course of the film. The events that happen in the video happen in the same order. So there's a chase between the band in the Challenger and motorcycle cops, followed by the street race with the XKE, followed by the performance at the hippie commune. And then it leads us right back to the beginning where Audio Slave is running a roadblock and ultimately commits suicide by car by running into those tractors. So they followed the narrative of the film exactly.
What do you know about the director and like the impetus for the video? Like why, you know, was the band a huge fan of the film, or was that the director's call? How'd that take place?
It's interesting. I couldn't find a lot of information about the director. In fact, it was credited to something called AV Club, the letter A, the letter V. And
like, yeah, like Audio Visual Club?
Yeah, when I looked that up, it was actually all I was finding information about was kind of an advertising agency or something like that. So I'm very unclear who actually directed it. And sometimes I can tell you that directors might have a reason for using a pseudonym. There's a very famous thing that dates way, way back in Hollywood. Quick, interesting little story. If a director was dissatisfied with how a movie he directed turned out, there was a rule under the Directors Guild of America that you could take your name off of a movie. You had to sort of go through a legal process, but you could file with the Directors Guild of America and say, hey, my work was compromised because the studio interfered, or the actor was drunk the whole time and his performance is horrible. Whatever it was, you could basically sue to have your name taken off of film.
Wow.
And when you did that, the rule was the substitute name under who directed it, they removed your name and they put the name Alan Smithee, Smithee, Smithee. And I'd have to do some research as to why that name was picked, because I don't know offhand. But there have been numerous instances where people have taken their name off of projects or used a pseudonym. Another example, an example of this would be the movie American History X with Edward Norton, where he plays a white supremacist. the director of that film had, I guess, some personality problems and stuff, and there were titanic battles between him and the studio and the producers and even Edward Norton himself. It was supposed to be one of the worst shoots in history. It was just, people weren't talking to each other and they were using go-betweens. Like the director was telling Ed Norton how to act in the scene by telling Ed Norton's assistant, who then had to go tell Ed Norton. It had broken down to the point they weren't even talking to each other.
Wow.
And at the end, the production company and studio were so upset with the cut of the movie that the director gave them that they actually hired Ed Norton to recut the film. And Ed Norton himself went into the editing room with an editor, totally recut the film. And when the director found out about it, he sued to have his name taken off of it. And that's what happened.
Wow.
So I'm not sure who or what AV Club is, but I was unable to find any real reference to it on the internet. So that's
too bad, man. I can't imagine why someone wouldn't be happy with this work, because the video is really cool.
I don't know. Or maybe there's a guy out there and his name is like Anthony Vargas Club and he goes by the name AV Club. But if he does, I didn't find him. So
yeah, man.
Yeah. So I did some extensive searches and nothing came up, but the guy's a hell of a director. I'll give him that.
I really enjoyed it, and maybe I'm biased because I like the music, but if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. And if you haven't read the article, go to streetmusclemag.com right now and read the article, because Rob does a fantastic job. And what's not to like? You got 2 really cool music videos featuring some fantastic films and some fantastic cars. There's something for everybody there. Yep. Rob, I have a question though. We were talking a little bit about just kind of how music videos have evolved and stuff. And what do you think about videos going away a little bit? Almost like, when you used to buy like a vinyl album, you would get the liner sleeve and you would get the liner notes and you would get all this. And it was an artistic piece that was meant to be consumed Absolutely. Together, right? You're listening to the record in a certain order. You got side A, side B, you got the liner notes with, usually featuring some art. You're consuming all of it at once, the way that the artist intended. And then videos came along and they kind of replaced that a little bit, because by then we had CDs, and you still had like the little pamphlet that came in the CD, and that was cool. It had some notes. But the videos were like the main attraction for those singles. Yeah. And now with people streaming, it's like, you don't even have that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, because I first started listening to music. The first album I ever bought in my life was the Rolling Stones' Emotional Rescue.
Yes.
I was about 9 or 10 years old. So I'm going to say 1980-ish, 1979 maybe. I got it on LP. And yeah, there was artwork all over it. There was a sleeve with lyrics and liner notes and all that kind of stuff. And then as we segued into the era of CDs, the artwork kind of took a slight step back, because all you would really have is the little pamphlet that you could pull out. And sometimes there was nothing on it. Sometimes there was stuff like lyrics and photographs and stuff in it. But really, you're right. I mean, the era... let me tell you this. I know for a fact that some of the notable albums of the era of rock music, the covers were invested in heavily, both in terms of thought by the artist and conceptual designers, and they hired a whole host of people to design an album cover. And there was a lot of money involved in it too, not just time. It was an artistic and production effort. And they've pretty much completely done away with that, because as you said, when you're downloading things off of iTunes, there'll be like one photograph, which is the album cover, and then you get zip. And that's a result of nowadays, if you want to find out about your favorite band, you just go do a search on the internet and you find millions of pictures and millions of articles. Whereas when I was a kid, all you got was that artwork that came with your LP or cassette or CD. There wasn't an internet. And that shift it's sad to me. And that also translates clearly to music videos. And nowadays they do not spend the effort or the money anymore. I think Madonna might, if I'm not mistaken, she holds the record for the largest budget for a music video. Back in the late 80s or early 90s, I think she had a video, if I recall, that had like a $4 million budget, which in that era was a huge amount of money. And you see it on the screen. I don't remember exactly what video it was. Maybe it was like Respect Yourself or something like that, but they had a tremendous set and all sorts of pyrotechnics and things. And
I don't, I've never worked in the music industry, but I've read books and I'm privy to some stuff in the media, but that was a time when if you cut an album and you were with a major label, like that was part of it. You had to do, you had to have your singles and you had to do a video. Yeah. And now we just don't have that.
Listen, in 1991, I was at NYU Film School at that time, and I had a friend who was going to a school in upstate New York in a town called Ithaca, which is where Cornell is, but he was sort of going to a sister college called Ithaca College. And I drove up there one weekend. It was like a 6-hour drive or something, upstate New York. And I hung out with him and his roommates they had rented a house that they were living in for that school year. And we just hung out and, ordered pizzas and watched MTV all day. And while I was there, I'll never forget this as long as I live, we're watching TV and all of a sudden a video comes on and it's these guys with hair over their faces and these ripped up blue jeans. And mind you, this was the era where like glam metal was the standard, Poison and bands like that, Rat, and and we had just gotten into like the Guns N' Roses era, but still Guns N' Roses started off as a hair band and it was all glam and stuff like that. And this video had these guys that literally looked like they crawled out from under a rock. Filthy. And this song was just blowing my mind. It was anthemic. And the video was Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. And that video, you can ask any music expert, guys who have written books on the subject of rock and roll, and they'll tell you that moment that kids like me saw that video, that it changed the face of music. That video did it. That's how powerful it was to people of my generation, because I was Generation X and we were kind of pissed off kids. We were pissed off at how corporate and slick and everything had become in America. And we longed for kind of something with some soul. And here were these guys that were just as pissed off as we were and looked at in that video.
Definitely.
And it was everything. And that was the power of a music video in those days,
Seriously. Yeah. Because, if you just heard the music, you might not have given it a second chance. Yeah. It's fantastic music, but if you hadn't seen it and saw such a shift, it might not have had that impact on you. I was reading a book by Dave Mustaine, the famous frontman for Megadeth, who I'm a huge fan of.
And he was in Metallica. Don't forget that.
That's true. That's true. One of the original members of Metallica. Mm-hmm. And he has a couple excerpts from David Ellefson, the longtime Megadeth bass player. And one of the anecdotes that he gives in the book was when they went on tour and they were looking for a new act to open for them. And one of the acts that they heard and saw was Alice in Chains. And he walks up and he sees that, he sees them kind of performing, and he's like, man, these guys rock, but what's with that name? That's such a stupid name. And within, a year, they were headlining their own tour.
Yeah.
And Mustaine, similarly, he says, the first time that he saw Nirvana perform, he was like, this is it. It's over. It's
yep.
Yeah. Like,
and someone else famously said that as well. It was someone from another band took one look at, this is a factoid that I normally have right here, and it's just slipping my mind who it was, but someone who was literally on the top of the charts in like 1991 was over at a buddy's house, just like I was, up in Ithaca, and saw Teen Spirit, and turned to his bandmate and said, our career just ended. Maybe
yeah, man.
Someone in Poison, like Bret Michaels or someone of that stature, just said it's all over.
Well, they were sort of right. I mean, those guys were like maybe like Poison and those hair metal bands. The thrash metal bands that were around at that time, they're still performing. They're still coming out with, yeah, exactly. But that's a little bit different because they had that like rough exterior. They weren't as glammy. But yeah, man, the tide turned for sure.
Yeah, and the point what we're really getting at together is the fact that the music video really was the only medium that had that sort of power to change a generation.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that aired on MTV Unplugged, right?
No, their Unplugged session was towards the end of Nirvana. It was actually on my birthday in 1993 in New York City, and I was almost able to get into the taping of it, and unfortunately didn't. But no, Smells Like Teen Spirit debuted in the fall of 91. And
have you seen the doc Soaked in Bleach?
Yes, I've seen Soaked in Bleach, and there's also another good one called there was one that was actually authorized and with the cooperation of Courtney Love and the other members.
I was gonna say, what's your take on that? I mean, we can get a little bit provocative. Do you think
we're segueing away from
yeah, a little bit away from cars.
But hey, since we're here, what do I think about what happened to Kurt? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, man. What do you think really went down?
Well, I'm not going to open myself or the magazine up to libel. Let's just say I believed that poor Kurt had just reached his limits with depression and addiction and fame and money, and I believed that for many, many years. And then not only the film Soaked in Bleach, but also a number of books that I've read that have come out in like the past 10 years have changed my mind on a lot of things. And I don't think we'll unfortunately ever know the truth. But if you were to ask me, and if I would just put it in such a way that would not put us in legal jeopardy, I don't think Kurt killed himself in the manner with which the story we were told.
We've been led to believe, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and if people are interested in this subject like I am, because to me, he was my John Lennon, of the beginning of my adulthood, and he really did change my generation. And if you love Kurt and you love Nirvana in that era and that music, it behooves you to, seek out what's out there, because there's a lot out there.
I agree, man. As much fun as I'm having with this conversation, I gotta reel it in a little bit.
Sure.
So I will end our RodCAST episode number 40 with 2 car-related questions.
Sure. Shoot. Go.
Bro,
yes.
What we've been dancing around this since our last episode and this one.
Yeah.
I'll flat out ask you, what do you hate about the Fast and Furious franchise, and what do you love about it? And you got to answer both of those.
Okay. You know I'm going to take flack for this. So be it. I've taken flack for pretty much every one of my movie reviews because I do have strong opinions. And, you know, there are people out there that love the original Gone in 60 Seconds and think it's a masterpiece. I don't. Okay. So let's just preface it with that. And I'm going to tell you that when did the first one come out? 2001?
2001. Yeah, I believe.
Okay. When the first one came out, yeah, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't art. It wasn't, you know, high art in the sense that it was a very grounded story aimed at a youth demographic. This wasn't a lofty film, but it was done really, really well. And Rob Cohen who directed it, is a very experienced director. I don't like all of his films, but on that film, he tapped into something. And before we came on air, you and I were talking about the fact that he and that film that he created is wonderful in the sense that it opened up a whole new generation of people to tuner culture, car culture, muscle cars, you know, Japanese imports, you name it. And I might, or you might not be really into, you know, Hondas or Mazdas or whatever, but we both respect, and I know this about you, we both respect car culture in any form. We live and breathe cars. So that film just created a whole new generation of kids who maybe some of them never really were, you know, obsessed with cars, saw that movie and it changed their life. You know, here we are talking about Nirvana changing my life or, you know, whatever. That film changed people's lives and you got to respect that. And on certain levels, it was a decently made film. I mean, definitely the stunt sequences were, I've read, were 90% actual practical stunts as opposed to CGI. It told a story that had some heart to it about a bunch of kids who are all kind of from dysfunctional backgrounds and come together as a family. And then you have a cop who originally comes in to you know, gain evidence on these people and bust up a car theft ring. It turns out he's a guy that's lacking family in his life, and he gravitates towards the very people that he's supposed to, you know, be arresting. And you know, so it has its level where it might not be a magnum opus, but it's definitely good storytelling, great action, and so forth. And you know, thumbs up. Let's put it. You know, I'll give that movie 7 out of 10. Let's put it that way: 6.5 to 7 out of 10.
That's you, audience at home. That's huge. That's huge to get that from Rob.
Let's put it this way: my favorite, you know, 2 muscle car, just car movie films of all time. If you guys are fans of my work, and we've already discussed Vanishing Point, you all know how I feel about that. Vanishing Point, I believe I gave an 8 to, and I believe the only other film I've given an 8 to was Two Lane Blacktop, which is if you guys haven't seen Two Lane Blacktop, do yourself a favor. It's an amazing movie. Unusual film as well, and very artistic. But yeah, I'll give the first Fast and Furious 6.5, 7. So that's pretty good by my standards. Now, having said that, subsequent to the original Fast and Furious, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to give you many platitudes because those films have gone, you know, from a height of Fast and the Furious 1, or just Fast and the Furious, and have nosedived to the point where I was telling Vinny before we came on air, I was on a flight to Italy once, and I selected, I think it was Fast and Furious 5 or 6, whatever. And I got 15 minutes into it, and I turned to my wife and I said, "This is actually beneath me. Like, I can't enjoy this because it's really dumb. Like, it's just insulting how stupid this is." And, you know, we're at a point where these are no longer street racers and cops. Now there's superheroes who are jumping out of airplanes and finding lost nuclear weapons. I don't know what the hell is going on anymore, you know? And I just can't get into it. And it's a shame because they actually feature cars that I'm more interested in now in these later films than the original. Because as you know, the original film, it was like tuner Japanese imports, which I can appreciate a Godzilla, a GTR. I can appreciate an NSX, but taking a run-of-the-mill Honda and putting 1,000 horsepower in it, that's not really my deal. But now the films feature Challengers. Well, I'm a Challenger owner, Chargers, Mustangs, and Camaros, and lots of cool muscle. But I can't get into it.
Would you consider that to be like sort of like a double-edged sword, right? So like they've built on the success of the original, right? Yeah. But they've also sold out because maybe they're playing to the audience, right? Because they're so enamored with these superhero movies that they're like, well, we need to tap into that and create superheroes of our own. Yeah. Okay, great. Now you're making this huge blockbuster film, which we can get product placement sponsors. Dodge, we're looking at you. So it's, pick your poison, I guess.
Pick your poison, but I mean, let's call a spade a spade. These movies are just, it's not good, grounded in reality. It's like ridiculous. And hey, I'm not a superhero guy personally, but I've gone to a few Batman movies or whatever, but I'm not rabid about it. But I know there are people out there that grew up with the comic books. So these things are very important to them. But that's supposed to be a world where anything can happen. Spider-Man it suspends your disbelief because you do believe there could be a guy out there who could sling webs and swing around and do all this stuff. But the Fast and the Furious started off, it was about illegal street racing, man. How did we get to saving the world from nuclear annihilation? And how are these schmucks from, like the street racing world suddenly better at that than, let's say, Delta Force or the Navy SEALs, Well,
you know what, Rob? That's story arc for you, okay?
Yeah, that's what there you go. Touché, man. You just shut me right up. Using my own vocabulary.
It's called character development, dude.
Yeah, there you go. Well, there's quite an arc on those characters.
I got to be honest with you, dude. I'm not a fan of the later stuff either. A part of me feels nostalgic for like 2 and 3 and stuff like that. But really, it's the first one. And for the reasons that you mentioned, listen, it got a whole generation into cars, and I think it's cool. Like you said, I'm not so much an import guy, but I like the fact that it got people into cars. And sometimes I'll see photos of like hot rodders from way back in the day, from like the 60s, or the 50s, and they're like Deuce Coupe with, the hood taken off and the engine exposed, things slammed down, the top chopped, and they're hanging out and they're greased back, and they got, their rolled up sleeves, and they're just, looking like total badasses.
Yeah, the whole American graffiti thing, yeah. Or Hollywood Nights thing, yeah.
Exactly. And you'll see, older people in those same photos driving like, like a New Yorker or something really like of the time, right? But factory fresh. Mm-hmm. And you got at least my mind goes there and thinks, and that guy probably thinks that that's some punk kid with like a jalopy piece of crap car. Mm-hmm. The same way that the older generation might look at some kid hanging out in, a Costco parking lot on the weekend with their Hondas or their Nissans, revving their engines. The spirit remains the same, man. The cars might be different.
Absolutely.
But I think it's cool.
And I don't believe on hating on, I don't hate on any group of car aficionados. And I personally, my interest range widely. I mean, yeah, I'm a muscle car guy, but I'm also, I'm into Ferraris, make no question about it. I'm into vintage non-muscle cars. I went up to the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance like 3 or 4 times in my life. And you've got Bugatti, 1930s Bugattis and Duesenbergs. And I mean, you look at some of these cars and they represent an era that's just gone. I mean, they made these cars look, I mean, they were art. They were rolling art. These weren't mass-produced, vehicles for the, transportation's sake. These were works of art, and I love all of that stuff just as equally to muscle cars and things like that. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I just wish the movies were a little bit better. A little bit more grounded. And Hollywood, if you're listening to me out there, please, by all means, get back into the genre of car movies where there is a market out there for it. There's everybody on magazines like this that are dying for it. And I'm at the head of the line in that respect.
Well, Rob, that's actually the perfect segue to my last question that I want to ask you before we sign off. And that is, do you have hope for new cinema when you watch things like Ford versus Ferrari?
Yes and no. Ford versus Ferrari was a really well-made film. It told a really good story. The attention to detail and the budget and the lavishness of the production value and stuff, really top-notch. And it gave me hope. I did a Rob's car movie review on it and gave it a very high rating. I forget exactly, but it couldn't have been higher than an 8, we've established. And so in that respect, yes, I do have hope. There was another film that came out a few years back, a Ron Howard movie called Rush, about the Titanic battle between Niki Lauda, God rest his soul, who just passed away last year, and James Hunt for the 1976 Formula One World Championship title. And it's a fantastic movie, great film, as are most of Ron Howard's films. I'm a big Ron Howard advocate. And so there are those select directors who certainly are still out there, who still know how to make a damn good car movie, but that's not their bread and butter. Like Rush is Ron Howard's only car movie he's ever made. He's probably not going to make another one. So those gems are going to remain few and far between, okay? Whereas back in the 70s, 80s, where the bulk of car movies come from, you had a lot of talented directors routinely dipping into that genre. You had people like Burt Reynolds has been in like 8 or 9 films, or was, I'm sorry, he's passed 2, but he was in 8 or 9 car themed movies in his career. I mean, you could look at Smoking the Bandit 1, Smoking the Bandit 2, Smoking the Bandit 3, Hooper, Cannonball Run 2. I mean, he was, like an icon of the car movie world, and he made a lot of them, and you're not having that today. And as we discussed, you can rely on there being a Fast and Furious franchise film every other year, and it's going to be the same dreck as the last Fast and Furious film. But there really is I don't see any systematic change in Hollywood shifting back towards our favorite genre. We're just talking about a couple of isolated films here and there, dude. Like, Ford versus Ferrari, Rush. One of my favorite car movies of the past 20 years was the Ryan Gosling movie Drive. Great car movie. But again, these are,
separated by quite a bit of time.
There is no car movie genre anymore. Let's put it that way. There are films that every once in a while that deal with cars. And as to whether that changes or not, you know, people's tastes always change. In a few years, are we still going to be obsessed with superhero movies? Or remember 15 years, 20 years ago, the disaster movie was like the big thing. You had the Titanic, and you had, you know, every movie was about a tsunami or a, you know, this or that, or climate change or a volcano, you know, destroying Los Angeles or whatever. And people got tired of it, you know. And then we got into another genre that was really popular. Are car films going to come back? Boy, I hope so.
Well, with that, we will leave it to the audience to answer, Rob.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank you so much for sticking with us. That's Rob's take. Leave us yours in the comment section below. Let us know if you think that, you know, should car movies make a comeback? Are they going to make a comeback? Which ones are your favorite? And do you agree with Rob's take on the videos that we mentioned, and especially the Fast and Furious franchise?
Yeah.
All right. This has been the RodCAST. I'm Vinny. That's Rob, and we'll talk to Greg in a minute. Peace
All
out.
right. Thanks for having me.
Rob Finkelman, everyone. Oh, thank you so much, Rob, for coming on the show. And what a great interview, man. I love talking to this dude, Greg. He always like offers some wild insight that I would never expect, and the same remains. Plus, we got to talk about Nirvana and Sheryl Crow and Audioslave. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, when you guys started to go down the road of Kurt Cobain, I literally had my hand on the button because I'm like, I don't know where this is going. Like, let's just see. I mean, it was fine. Like, we didn't actually cut anything. Just so you guys know, we didn't cut anything. Said that you didn't get to hear.
No, Rob doesn't have any inside secrets that no one else does.
Yeah, I was out. I didn't know where it was going, so I was holding my hand, like hovering over the button.
Well, as soon as he said he was a huge fan, I was like, all right, I got to ask him, because like any huge Nirvana, Kurt Cobain fan has an opinion on the matter. So I don't know. Everybody leave your opinions and comments in the comment section below. Let us know what you think really happened, even though this is like the car show about all things automotive. It's somehow related. I don't know.
Well, you know what's really funny is Unsolved Mysteries is coming back on Netflix, right? Whatever. But right. I've watched all the old ones. Like they had the old ones on, I don't even remember what server, but one of the old original Unsolved Mysteries is Kurt Cobain's death.
No way.
And to hear them tell it like fresh off the time, like, you know, it was right when it happened. It gets told a little differently. It's changed a little bit over the years.
Well, yeah, like Rob was saying, you know, once he watched Soaked in Bleach and some of the other docs, his opinion has changed. But not to go down that rabbit hole again.
I'm just saying it's really weird to hear it talked about in real time versus after it's turned into whatever it's turned into.
Yeah, what, like 30 years later?
Yeah, God, that makes me feel old. Oh, why?
Yeah, Grandpa.
Why would you say that? Oh.
Hey, you know what's crazy though? So like you're talking about Unsolved Mysteries, and you know what's wildly popular right now is all these like these podcasts, these true crime podcasts, right? So like we've been doing this for like a year now, and just like the podcast scene has just blown up in that past year, probably because everybody's at home and, you know, they have cameras like us and they want to record and stuff, which is fine. But the true crime podcasts are like taking off like wildfire, man. People really love those things. My girlfriend listens to them all the time. I can't get into them just because I don't know. I guess I like the visual aspect of like seeing it on TV or whatever. But
yeah. Well, you know, it blows up when South Park makes fun of it, right? Like,
well, The Simpsons just did an episode about it too.
Oh, that's right. That was just on like on Sunday, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a new episode.
Yeah, I was watching. I was like, "Hey, that's pretty cool. We have a podcast." And then, I was like, "We're culturally relevant. All right."
Yeah. Hey, Simpsons, when are you going to do something about us? Even though I'm convinced that Matt Groening's a time traveler. But that's not for here or there.
This is the car podcast about all things automotive, Greg. It's not the conspiracy theory podcast. Yeah, we have a separate channel for that. You guys go check it.
I'm sure Matt Groening uses a car in the future when he's there.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, a flying one. It's made by Tesla.
We have like wildly gone off track here.
That's all right. That's what the people tune in for. And if you've made it this far, we appreciate your viewership. Obviously, check out everything on powerautomedia.com. Check out enginelabs.com. Check out streetmusclemag.com. And we always have content going up for you guys. Give us a like, comment, and subscribe. Click all those buttons, type all those links, do the whole thing, and help us out because we're trying to grow the channel right now. And if you like the content here and you want to see more of it, then we need your support.
Yeah, and especially on YouTube, that notification bell and stuff, YouTube's got a really weird algorithm, and I'm not going to even pretend to be any kind of expert on it. But the more you guys interact with the YouTube side, the more they reward us by giving it to more people. It's really weird. If you like it, let us know. I feel like I'm begging for clicks and stuff, but we need help with YouTube. I mean,
please, sir. We want some more.
Where's your gruel spoon?
Yeah, seriously. Help us out. Give us a like, comment, subscribe. That's the last time I'll ask on this episode. But check out streetmusclemag.com, enginelabs.com, and we'll see you guys next week. Same time, same channel. Peace out. Yep.